Hey, welcome back to Jason Unleashed. How's it going, you guys? Happy Friday. Jason here. Good to see you. Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you so much for watching and thank you for joining me. Excited for today's guest. She is just a phenomenal woman. She is Ashlee Marie Preston. I can't even talk. It's been a day, guys. Ashlee Marie Preston, and she is a civil rights trans activist and just does such great work. Let's bring her in. I'll let her tell you a little bit more about herself, but she is incredible, and I'm glad she's here to talk to us today and just spread the good word, you guys. Spreading the good word. Here we go. Do the Ashlee dance. Ashlee, 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 Ashlee. I'm still waiting for you guys to create me a theme song. So, Ashlee, Ashlee.
Hey.
Hey, hi.
Oh,
Hey, can you hear me, Ash?
yeah, I can hear you. A
Okay,
little bit.
cool. What happened? Are we? Is some? You froze.
Did I freeze?
Oh no. Okay, we're good. We're good. We're good. You didn't freeze. You didn't freeze.
That face is frozen. That's what that is.
First of all, yes, you guys, joining us is Ashlee Marie Preston. As I was saying in the intro before you said the request, you're good. You're on time, girl. I love it. But you are a trans activist, a civil rights activist, a political commentator, a journalist, media personality. You wear so many hats. And you wear them all so well, and you're so powerful. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with me today, because I think the conversation around trans and Black trans lives matter is important. It's so important right now. So let's talk about that. First of all, how are you doing?
Oh my God, I'm good. Like I've just been running, like literally for the last 2 weeks. It's been back to back to back, and I know that we have been trying to do this for a minute. So like, so glad that we can finally get it.
Yeah. Congratulations on all you have going on. I mean, from your many articles and such great publications like Marie Claire, Playboy, Billboard. We've seen you on CBS, NBC, The Young Turks, ABC. You have been everywhere, being in this vocal powerhouse for people of the trans experience, yes, but also for marginalized groups of people and just LGBTQ plus individuals in particular. The conversation about trans lives matters. Let's talk about that, because that has been entered in the conversation in as a layer of Black Lives Matter. Yes.
Yes. Well, the thing is that one of the things that many people don't know about the Black Lives Matter movement is that it was actually formed by Black queer women.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always been a close connection to the LGBTQ community through the Black movement. But of course, you have like agent provocateurs and people who come in with different divisive narratives and rhetoric. But ultimately, there are so many intersectional movements that focus on Black and LGBTQ or queer liberation simultaneously.
Why do you think that people aren't? And let's get raw and real with this, Ash. Because I mean, we know each other. We talk, but for the audience, why do you think that Black trans women, the trans community and Black trans women are so periphery, if that? And why are they not? Why are they not held in the same regard or seen as a community that needs to be protected, a community that needs to be spoken about when there's murders of Black trans women, as we've seen in the last week there's been two. Why do you think that there's not an urgency in talking about those egregious acts and also in talking about the trans community as a whole?
Well, because there's this, I'm sorry, there's something that's really loud. I don't know.
It's my sorry, it's the ring thing. Babe, can we turn off the ring? Continue. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. So basically, the reason why it's been such a challenge for us is because there's a lack of understanding around intersectionality. And so, for those who are watching who don't understand, intersectionality describes multiple threats of discrimination when an individual's identity overlaps with multiple marginalized groups. So, what we see is that trans people don't always feel embraced in the Black community because trans issues are sometimes seen as secondary and a distraction from the overall Black liberation movement. We're not always embraced by the feminist space because sometimes trans women aren't seen as women. We aren't always embraced by the LGBTQ community because there's a lot of elitism, there's racism, sexism. transphobia, we see gay white men sometimes using their sexuality as a shield to absolve them from the responsibility of dismantling those systems. And in many cases, these groups and communities are at war with one another. So Black trans women are always caught in the crossfire.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why you see these statistics and numbers reflect the ways in which we've been disproportionately impacted.
Why do we think that is in regards to just our community? Because I mean, I've said this before that, we're a community that is fighting for equality and is fighting for so many things that we don't get. We're fighting for our seat at the table, if you will. But yet within our own community, we are the worst to each other. Where does that stem from, in your opinion?
Well, I think it also stems from, like a lack of understanding around intersectionality. Really, intersectionality is so much, like, even, again, when we're having conversations with our white counterparts or peers, and they're like, well, we all go through things. Like, I've struggled too. And what we're saying is not that you haven't gone through struggles. We're saying that it's never been because of your race or your gender. And so when people truly understand that what it means to experience multiple threats of discrimination simultaneously, and what it means when you have instances of structural and institutional violence that exacerbate the violence and disenfranchisement we face, then it's no wonder why we see the numbers that we see. It's no wonder why even in the trans murders, they're predominantly Black. It's no wonder why we are under a current administration that has made attacks toward our community since the first week in office. And so these are all conversations that we really need to have about the ways in which people have been benefiting from white supremacy. Like, it all stems from white supremacy, even if we don't realize that it's connected to LGBTQ issues.
Right, right. Allyship, Ashlee, is something that people are, it's now, and I hate to say trendy, because things are very trendy now. Things are hyper performative, if you will. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, we've seen some really good performances. I mean, Oscar-worthy performances from places that, I mean, like Emmys. But allyship is something that people are now wanting to engage in, and people don't really know how to be a great ally. I had talked to a psychologist this morning, and she said one way is to listen for you and the conversations you're having with your colleagues. And I'm sure, because I mean, you have close to 350,000 followers just on Instagram, let alone the people who come to your website and read your works and engage with you across many other outlets. What are some of the conversations you're having with people about allyship and how to be a better ally?
I think a lot of that conversation has been centered around trusting Black leadership. It also is about not thinking that you understand what we need better than we do. But I think it's also about doing the work. Here's the deal. Allyship is not meant to be comfortable. It's not meant to be convenient. It's not meant to come with a rewards card or like a punch it card with a free Slurpee every time you show up. It's not meant to come with pats on the back, follows, a podcast, any of that. Allyship should come from this place that you understand the ways in which you've actively benefited from systems that have destroyed Black lives. And it comes from this unwillingness to attempt to distance yourself from anti-Blackness. Like, oh, those racists. It's not those. When we're talking about white supremacy, we're talking about a culture through which you have benefited from as well. And so that's why some of the best allies are doing anti-racist activism. And so that's kind of a newer mainstream term that people are hearing, anti-racism. And it's from a quote that Angela Davis did back in the day, in which she said, in a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist, we must be anti-racist. And so non-racism really comes from the way in which white people were socialized to show their allyship by not talking about color or not seeing color. I don't see color, and so it's like, but not seeing it and turning away or burying your head in the sand is not going to disrupt those systems that continue to be the culprit. And so you must be anti-racist. And so that means You must deeply interrogate the ways in which you benefited. You must deeply interrogate the ways in which you've offered room and board to white supremacy. You must deeply interrogate the ways in which you have infantilized other white people when you know they're wrong, but you just kind of, oh, that's just Uncle Ted, or oh, that's just Carl, he means well, or no, Brad is not that way. He's just having these excuses that we make for white supremacy that come at the price of our lives, our dignity, our sense of respect, our ability to access healthcare, housing, fair employment, social support or services, our ability to even walk our kids to school, or to even be able to to drive home from work without the fear of being pulled over by a law enforcement officer and losing our lives possibly, and ending up in a hashtag and a lit candle. And so I think that all of those things, when we talk about, I recommend Jane Elliott. She's one of my favorite anti-racism activists. She is a white woman, and I think that it is of the utmost importance for white people to talk to other white people, because they are immune to the weapons of anti-blackness that are used against us. The gaslighting, the discrediting, the why are you so angry? Why don't you place of love and peace? Why don't you just say it nicer? Maybe if you were nicer to that officer, maybe like if they, all of these different things that whiteness has used to weaponize against us, but it doesn't work against other white people. So, and when we say talk to other white people, what we're ultimately saying too is show up to the conversation in a way that includes you as well, because when you can share your own vulnerability and the ways in which you've had to overcome deep-rooted subconscious anti-blackness, it creates a safe space that fosters learning and growth.
Right. Very that. Thank you for driving that point home, because some people, and what we're finding, and just in conversations, they're uncomfortable. I mean, they're very uncomfortable having these conversations with non-POC people, are very uncomfortable having conversations about what's happening with people of color, right? And because there are people who are well-meaning, absolutely. But when you are able to kind of meet in a space of vulnerability, it does make it more of an open space to really connect. And I think that's the human aspect that's missing from some of these conversations. You said disruptor. And one of the things I love about you, Ashlee, is when I hear interviews and I see you talk about what's happening, is that is a word that you use. And when you say it, it's like there's so much power behind that. And you yourself are a disruptor in a way. Never in your life have you seen a reckoning like this before, yes?
No.
No, right? Okay, and so now that it's happening, do you feel even more of a responsibility and maybe a pressure to even be a bigger disruptor?
You know what? I think I'm still disrupting at the same intensity, if you will. The difference is that because of COVID-19, it completely shut operations down.
Yeah.
So for the first time, you can hear the people who've been doing this work. In fact, I even said like the first couple of weeks of quarantine, I was kicking, because these A-list people, some of them, oh my God, getting on live stream, doing ridiculous stuff. Like they didn't know what to do with themselves without capitalism to hold them up. They didn't know what to do with themselves without these superficial constructs of worthiness and importance. They didn't know what to do with themselves with any of it. And so the real stars, like the real people who are the heartbeat, the pulse of our respective communities, for the first time in an unprecedented way, got to take center stage during this time where it's important for us to talk about how we sustain community, how we sustain the economy, what we do about the governmental disruption that's happening, which is the different type of disruption. And so I think it has been a beautiful moment, because we're seeing people be celebrated. Many of my peers and colleagues, who do, yourself included, there's so many people who are being celebrated for doing what they've always done without any credit, any recognition, any of that. But we're seeing this shift. There's a shift in consciousness that's taking place, and it's not just in the activist space. It's exploding into economics and into marketing and into, you know, politics and government. And we're completely changing the way that we have these conversations. I'm seeing white women give over their Instagram accounts to Black activists and community leaders and organizers. I'm seeing people admit the ways in which they directly contributed to systemic anti-Blackness. Some people, I know, like a lot of our allies are afraid that the moment they say, like, you know what, I've actually done this thing and I wasn't even aware of it, they're afraid that all of a sudden somebody's going to kick down the door and the windows will implode, and they're like, you know, and we're going to see them. It is actually a relief to hear white people confess to what we already knew, because it pushes back against, again, when I talked about weaponizing gaslighting. Like, gaslighting, for those who don't know, is this militant, aggressive denial of cultural truths that typically white people employ because they're afraid to have a mirror held up to them in a way in which they see themselves for the first time, and it disrupts their delusion of what it means to be a good person. So there's a lot of good people, you know, and there's a difference between being a good person and having good intentions and still being subconsciously complicit in how these systems are, you know, strengthened and empowered.
Right.
And so that's important. Like, I am here for admitting mistakes because we can't heal what we don't reveal.
And that leans on your TED Talk that you had in 2019, which was phenomenal. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And about you had to recognize and reconcile things within yourself for your own healing when you were called out. And Ashlee, when I heard that, I thought like, Ashlee Marie got checked, but it had to be, you had to go through that uncomfortable experience to grow and to be who you are now. Trauma porn. That's a term that I'm glad that you're using, and that I feel like you have coined that term. You should get some kind of residual and some kind of virtual trauma porn, because your article in Marie Claire about not what people posting lynchings and posting dead bodies. I saw a picture yesterday of it was probably from the 1800s of a Black woman breastfeeding a white baby, and it sat with me for I was still until now we're having this conversation, and just so many images that are very disturbing. And it's like, do I need to see that? And does the public, do our non-POC counterparts need to see that? And when you mention trauma porn, you're leading on that, hinting on that. Tell me why that it's important to have a conversation around those images and why they are sometimes inappropriate on social media and on the internet.
Well, I've always said that historically, traditionally, America has always had this voyeuristic obsession with Black death and pain, and a lot of it is colonial. Even when we talk about, you know, I said, you know, that trauma porn is as American as apple pie, you know, pies that they brought to these lynching barbecues, when they literally would bring children and families. They would play, eat, and then watch a Black man be tortured and burned and then dismembered, you know. And so the things that America has always seen Black people as inanimate, as you know, as ancillary, you know, as when we talk about capitalism, even in the birth of it, it was colonialism was the root of capitalism, like coming here, slaughtering indigenous people, working Black people to like build up, you know, these dynasties that later became corporations. And then the law enforcement, their job is to protect the interests and the assets of these wealthy people and corporations, who then also bought the government. And then, so there's all of this, like, these like ways through which, like, we've never really been seen as human. Even when we talk about, like, all men are created equal, but were we really? Like, we weren't considered men or human. We were considered, and neither were women. Like, when they said all men were created equal, they meant cis heteronormative, God-fearing men are created equal. And so I think that that conversation about trauma porn was just reminding people that, first and foremost, it's not enough to share a video. It's important to use those moments to have one-on-one conversations with other non-Black friends and family members and loved ones to talk about how you can actively work to betray white supremacy and destabilize its power grip on America. And also, it's a moment to think about the fact that you're re-traumatizing those of us who've lived it. We don't need to see a video to know of George Floyd having his neck leaned on. We don't need to see that in order to know that that's true. So what these videos do, in addition to re-traumatize Black people, is it reinforces this need to prove our oppression. Like, it's almost like white people need proof that racism exists. We need proof that law enforcement has been one of the biggest terrorist organizations since it began. We need proof to talk about these things. And so our word wasn't good enough. And so pardon us if we aren't jumping up with joy because you decided to share a video on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter that robs us of our dignity in our final moments. You know, when we talk about a person's dying day or that moment in which they take their last breath, that's a private moment. Yeah. You know what I mean? And if you notice, Black and brown bodies are the only visuals of death we have. When was the last time you saw a white person murdered on social media? Right. We've had several mass shootings, college campuses in Las Vegas. We've had people get in standoffs with the police. Matter of fact, usually they don't because they can grab the gun from the holster and still live to tell about it. You know what I mean? And the thing is that there's, again, this obsession with our pain and what it does subconsciously. And the people who don't mean it that way, they're just trying to raise awareness. But the thing is that it is a dog whistle to the white supremacists and other people who are carrying out these acts. Like, we know there's a conversation around the Boogaloo and these like groups, these like homegrown terrorist groups that are that are conspiring to carry out these things. And the other thing is that it's a reminder to Black Americans to stay in our place. It's a reminder that if you dare have the audacity to challenge white supremacy, this could be you too. Right. So it's a way of not only keeping a firm grip on what we perceive to be crime or justice, but it's a reminder. Yeah. And it's a subconscious weaponization. I feel that, and until you explained it that way, Ashlee, I never thought of it that way. So thank you for breaking that down, because people, there's so much context and there's so much that goes into, I guess, these images and how we interpret things that people just don't get. And in order to get it, you have to be told why you need to get it. And that was educational for myself. So thank you so much for explaining that, because that was, when I heard the term trauma porn, I was like, never. It's a very provocative and evocative phrase, but it just makes sense. You're so busy. You are so busy. Busy. You're right. I mean, you are not only an activist, you have your hands involved in so many things. Today marks the 4-year anniversary of the shootings at Pulse in Orlando, and you have been involved in an incredible documentary called Disarm Hate. Let's talk about that, because the trailer is dropping today. Yes. I actually dropped it on Facebook. I'm about to drop it on Instagram when we get off. So 4 years ago, after the shooting at Orlando, at Pulse nightclub in Orlando, myself and 8 other members of the LGBTQ community got on this tiny RV and traveled across the country to Washington, D.C. to the Disarm Hate rally to remember those lives, and also talk about how we can bring forth legislation that is much more thoughtful about the families, lives, and communities that are destroyed by gun violence. You know, thinking about, you know, not like, oh, they're going to take our guns. Like, we're talking about putting common sense gun laws in place. And so on the way to DC, we stopped through different cities across the country where there had been infamous like murders or violence committed toward LGBTQ people. And we went to the sites where it happened and talked about the stories and talked to some locals. And then we got to unpack within ourselves collectively as a community, like how that made us feel, it was interesting to see that some people saw things different than others. And so that was really the birth of my fascination with intersectionality, was on that RV, to have to explain to white people and non-Black POC my experiences as someone who's Black, and then having someone else Black on there, but maybe they didn't understand the trans experience. And so we talked about everything you can imagine, like people living with HIV and AIDS, people who've been incarcerated, people of trans identity, people who have been sex workers and drugs, and people who have been abused as children, all of these different things. So it started out with a conversation about gun violence, and it ended up really delving or digging to the root of hate. Like, it's all hate is at the core of it. You know what I mean? And so thinking about, you know, if we're trying to resist hate, where do we draw love from? And the truth is that we've been peddling this false narrative that the LGBTQ community is super unified and we're all one. And it's like the Village People 2020, or back then it was 2016. And that couldn't be the farthest thing from the truth.
Right.
And so we are learning how to be the very thing within our own respective community that we're asking for our allies and cis heteronormative folks to be.
Agreed. And see that, and actually, that's the point I was making, is about how we want all these things for ourselves from other people, but we can't give those things to ourselves first. And we're the most hateful to each other within our own communities, the most racist to each other within our own community. But yeah, we want to put on a front for. It's like the Avengers hating each other, but but in order to fight Thanos, we act like we get along, right? Because Thanos is the greater bad. But behind closed doors, we can't stand each other. It just drives me insane. But I'm glad.
Reference, yes.
But right, it's like, it's the truth though. And you're an executive producer on this, so you had a heavy hand in editing and making in the content that went into it.
But interesting too, because like, and y'all see it in the documentary. I don't want to spoil it. That almost didn't happen, and we captured that on camera. There was a conflict between me and the director, who's a white lesbian woman who is a friend of mine, dear friend. I love Jules Brudak. And but again, really having to get honest about the ways in which we don't understand privilege. The fact that you mentioned a second ago, you said that, you know, sometimes like we can be like really racist and really all of these things. It's actually been worse for me in the LGBTQ community sometimes, because your ability to hide behind the oppressed label of being LGBTQ, it again makes people feel as though they have a past,
right,
or that they're beyond reproach, they're above reproach to talk about race and talk about gender. And the truth has always been that we didn't see people show up for reproductive rights the way they showed up for same-sex marriage. We didn't see people, you know, show up for trans women, Black trans women, the way they showed up for a wedding cake. You know what I mean? You know, so basically there are all of these reminders that trans lives and Black lives, and more specifically Black trans lives, don't really have a place in the general interest of the community. And so the reason why that is because we have continued, Black women in general have always been called on to be attack dogs. So y'all want us to fight the battles when you need you know, when you need muscle. You know what I mean? They always like whistle for Black women. And the minute that the battle has been won, then they go back to accessing their privilege and that residual patriarchal power that they would have had their sexuality not been a barrier to prevent that. And so in a time like 2020, where, you know, every, you know, A-list celebrity has their right hand gay, or they're like, you know, like in Hollywood, and it's kind of like, to be honest with you, before this current administration, it has kind of started to go back, obviously. but no one was really concerned about us because we became the community of I got mine, good luck getting yours.
Yeah.
And so here we are again, you know, back at the Stonewall Inn, basically, and we have to rely on Black women or Black femmes to lead. We have to rely on Black resilience and Black courage and, you know, Black strength to be able to pull the country up, whether it's in politics. We saw that happen in Alabama with Doug Jones and Roy Moore, that race. We've seen it even the way that a lot of these campaigns pandered specifically to the Black community. And the thing is that not even understanding that we aren't a monolith. And if you were doing it right, the issues that many of us are experiencing are happening in different communities too sometimes. The only difference is that we are the only community that has the harms that have been done, other than Indigenous people, obviously, who are still, you know, coming up missing. They are being kidnapped. No one's talking about it. To be such a small population, and Indigenous people are constantly incarcerated. There's just so many things. COVID-19, it devastated a lot of these sovereign nations. And so other than Indigenous people, which is why usually we say Black and Indigenous together, because we witnessed and bore the brunt of colonial power and takeover, nobody else can say that they have their blood in the soil of this country. Sometimes, yes, there has been struggle. There has been things about rights, but America never made reparations. They never made it right. Instead, they gaslighted, talked over us, you know, and to this day, we still have a hard time having conversations about it because now we've witnessed the birth of class solidarity. And it's not the birth of it really, but in the United States, we haven't really talked about class solidarity. So when I talk about people who are unwilling to dismantle anti-Blackness, systems of anti-Blackness, I refer to them as the beneficiaries of genocide and slavery. But people automatically think that I'm talking about white people. And the truth is that they have now employed these mouthpieces, like Black and brown mouthpieces, who echo these anti-Black messages. And so now I inform people that you don't have to be white to be a beneficiary of genocide and slavery. It's anyone who gets to lick up the crumbs that falls from white supremacy's table in exchange for their cooperation. And so we see Black folks who are sitting up in Hollywood not saying nothing. They have nothing to say about nothing because that house is perched up nice where they can see the skyline. They have more cars than a dealership. They, you know, they have all these contracts and different things in play. And so we recognize that it's not, yes, race is huge, and Blackness, anti-Blackness is always going to be pervasive until we tackle it head on. And we're also seeing the people that are willing to sell us out for their own personal selfish gain and interest. And so we're not only having to battle all of these other, you know, white supremacy and these systems, they have turned our own against us. And so now, if there were ever a time for us to build cross-cultural collaboration, it's now. As a Black trans woman, I need to be there when they come for immigrants and undocumented people. As a Black trans woman who doesn't have a reproductive function, I still need to protect reproductive rights for those who do. As a Black trans woman who's never served in the military and who has my own opinions about the military industrial complex, I still need to be there to care and look out for veterans who put their lives on the line for this country, who got dumped off on Skid Row in a paper hospital gown with no one to take up for them or advocate for them. It is my job as a Black trans woman, you know, to still talk about intimate partner violence and to talk about, you know, I don't have children, but I care about the education of inner city children. You know what I mean? And the fact that a classroom of 30 students, 24 of them are Black, and there's not one Black teacher in the entire school, no one to relate to them on a cultural level. Those conversations, we need to make it important to us, because if we get caught up on these single issue arguments, it's going to make us miss the bigger picture. So I think that white supremacy has only been able to thrive through divide and conquer. They put brown people against black people, black against brown, you know, Asian Americans, they like, you know, the model minority stereotype to like, you know, provoke this sense of like, there are just so many mental gymnastics that have been played. But 2020 is the year that people have pulled the covers off of it. We
Literally.
are educated, knowledgeable, aware, connected. And more importantly, we have more people standing with us who are willing to betray white supremacy in a way that's unprecedented. So much so, they're out here firing pepper rubber bullets at journalists. They're out here gathering journalists.
It's like you said, unprecedented and a little, I don't want to say bizarre, but I use that word, Ashlee, because like our whole life, majority of a black person's life or a marginalized person's life is you're always trying to fit in, to be comfortable, to survive and maintain. And you don't, there's, I had this conversation the other day where I feel like I'm seen, and it's awkward because you never had this type of visibility before where people are like, oh, you're black, how are you doing? Like there's a concern, and whether or not it's a legit or a real or authentic concern, it still feels kind of like, I'm good, but thank you. You know, like it's so weird. And
Well, there's a
good.
difference between doing the work as an ally and white guilt, because white guilt still centers you. It centers your feelings and your response to the oppression that we experience. And so many of us are explaining to our allies, like, we understand, yes, you have a feeling or a thought about it, but right now urgency is of the utmost importance. And so we don't have time for you to process this or, you know, center your own grief around realizing who you are and what your culture has afforded you. As a human being, on a human level, I get it. As someone who may be next, we need you to move. We need
Right.
all that.
We saw all the memes, Ash, about like, listen, I don't have time to console you right now. We're out here fighting a war. Figure it out. There's so many memes that came out. With all that said, Ashlee, what is your hope for the future? Because when the running theme and where we want things to go is, and I don't want to say theme, the result we want is for change. What is your hope for the future? What do you hope to see?
I hope to see economic advancement. Even when we talk about white supremacy, most people think that we're talking about all white people, any white person you come to, the woman who works at Lancome, you know, you know, the barista at Starbucks.
Starbucks. Yeah.
Right. When we talk about white supremacy, we're specifically talking about the structural and institutional systems that continue to destroy Black lives. Quiet as it's kept, and it's not kept very quiet, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I don't care if you think Black people are whatever. I really don't. What I have a problem with is when you are the gatekeeper and you have the keys to my and you hold the keys to my ability to access healthcare, to access employment, to access housing, to access social support, to you know, like again, keep my life, to grow old, to be able to. That's when it becomes a problem. And so the remedy there is when we start creating economic opportunities for us to build as a people. That's what equity looks like. It's about equity, equitable justice, right? And they know that too, because when we had Black Wall Street, many people don't even know like about the story of Black Wall Street in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. When we started building businesses and they were booming, and we had Black millionaires right like in the early 1900s, and all of these things were happening. And because they understood that once we had that economic power, we wouldn't have to rely on these systems, and we could even build up defense. We could take up for ourselves. We could. And so they bombed it. First of all, they said that there was a guy in an elevator with a white woman and the power went out. And then she said that he tried to rape her.
Right.
And so they used that to then go in through these businesses And they started bombing. They rented airplanes and started taking these homemade bombs and dropping them on Black communities and businesses. And when people ran out to save their lives, they shot them down. They killed them.
Right.
And so, and there's been other instances in our history where Black people have developed economic power and self-determination and full agency in our in our free enterprise and like how we did business, and they knew that that was dangerous. And so now fast forward 2020, it's why it's important that when we have Black billionaires and millionaires, that they step out from the shadows and say something.
Yeah.
We know you're not asleep, sis. We're looking at you. We're looking dead at you. And the thing is that it's the only way that white supremacy is able to keep a stronghold. They need us. And by they, I'm talking about the powers that be, the full top upper echelon. If we don't work, they don't eat. And I don't think we've ever thought about it like that before. Like even our spending power, even in the LGBTQ community, we have, it was a $917 billion spending power since it's went over $1 trillion, and it's $3.7 trillion globally. Why do you think they show up to Pride and put rainbows on everything? But meanwhile, I have a hashtag Pride Pledge campaign asking them to reallocate funds they had for Pride festivals toward vulnerable members of the LGBTQ community who've been disproportionately impacted by COVID. And we haven't gotten a red cent from a major corporation or a sign-on. You know what I mean? And we have over 20,000 signatures on change.org right now. You know what I mean? And so we have to really know your enemy. That's the only thing I can tell you is know your enemy. And sometimes the enemy really may not be white boy Brad, who's the barista at your local Starbucks in Brentwood. The actual enemy will be the actual, and again, this isn't Starbucks, but I'm talking in general, corporations, you know, who, because even when we talk about voting, you know, government is bought and paid for because they're banking on you not showing up to vote.
The polls, yeah.
On you not taking the 2020 census, which determines how much federal money each state gets for their infrastructural needs, their government, how many representatives we have in Washington, D.C. fighting on our behalf. If we're undercounted and we don't take the census, it means we're underfunded, it means we're underrepresented, and it means that they have achieved exactly what they wanted to do, is reinforce gerrymandering, suppress the vote, keep people from claiming what's theirs, and keep you economically disenfranchised and politically disempowered. And so the way that we fight back against that is it isn't a single axis approach. It is voting. It is taking the census. It is protesting and showing up to march. It is being a disruptor. It is using your platform to speak truth to power. It is building allyship and also having white people educate other white people. It's not Black people's job to dismantle a system that we didn't build.
Right.
And so all of these different things work in concert with one another. And that has led us to the unprecedented moment that we're in right now. And what I know for sure is that we will be victorious, and there's no turning back because we completely lifted the rug and shook it out, and all of that crud and dust and debris and all of those things that have made this country impure and have made our anthem and everything, our allegiance, inauthentic. All of those things are about to be healed.
There you have it.
It may not be tomorrow, but that day will come.
Dude, a bright day is upon us. Yes, preach, Ashlee Marie Preston, man. Look. When I had to have you on, because out of all the people that I have been listening to and talking to, and just I feel like you break it down the best, and you come from such a unique experience, and such in your journey from where you started to now, and just how you educate and so passionately and so authentically. The people need to see this. So thank you so much for taking the time for being here. And I know you're busy with New York Pride. You're out there. handling it, but it has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on. Where can people find you? Where can they support you? Where can they follow you? Where can they experience all of Ashlee Marie Preston?
Yes, you can follow me, Ashlee, ASHLEE Marie Preston on Instagram, Ashlee M Preston on Twitter, because apparently my name is too long for them. And then Ashlee Marie Preston on Facebook, and my profile's public because I'm always open to conversation and interacting with folks. Because they only give you 5,000 friends, and I'm usually over. So like, I'm just like, let me public so people can just come and have a party with us.
That's great. And then also the trailer for Dismantle the Hate is out today. When is the documentary drop?
So Disarm Hate drops on June 23rd on most major streaming platforms. And I'm going to have the trailer up after this talk, and then share with a friend. And then also be sure to support hashtag Pride Pledge. Asking major corporations who have earmarked money for Pride festivals that have been canceled to at least give a small percentage of those proceeds to struggling members of the LGBTQ community who've been impacted by the pandemic. And also check out youareessential.org. We're funding grassroots organizations all over the country who've been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The most vulnerable people are doing the most vulnerable work. They always have, and we always will. Gabrielle Union, Dwayne Wade have supported. Megan Rapinoe, Justin Tranter, Rosario Dawson. All these amazing people have given us some coins. You know, as someone who has asthma, I haven't been able to be out in the protests and all of that because I'm like at high risk of getting COVID. But I'm an ex-sex worker. I'm a girl from the street, so I know how to get coins. And so I'm using my talents, those talents to get us money so that we can fund these people who need it the most. And so, yeah, follow me, stay tuned, be a part of the conversation, and let's do this.
Let's do this. And for everyone watching, I'm going to post this live on my Instagram page. So if you want to go back and watch it and I'll have all of Ashlee's handles there as well. So if you guys are watching and want to see it again, don't worry, I'm going to put it on my page. Ashlee, thank you so much. It's good to see you. Good to talk to you. Have a great time in New York Pride. Stay safe, and we're going to see you soon, okay?
See y'all soon.